Welcome to Pitch and Raise. I would like you to tell me your pitch and raise story.
Hi, I'm Jim Cantrell. I was on the founding team of SpaceX, and I'm now the co-founder and CEO of Phantom Space. And I'm famously the guy that took Elon Musk to Russia to buy rockets, and when that failed, we started SpaceX.
Tell me a bit about your pitch and raise story. I know this is like a proper story. I mean, Elon calling you randomly. You're the guy, respected person in the industry, and you get this random call.
Yeah, let's go back to 2001, and this was before 9/11 happened, and the world was a happier, simpler place, it seems. Very few people had heard of something called PayPal, and even fewer people have heard of a guy called Elon Musk. I was busy with my day job doing space warfare stuff. Yeah, for the U.S. government. And I get this call out of the blue from some guy. I answered it. I had the top down on my car. It was a Friday afternoon driving home. Suddenly, this strange accent, which I couldn't quite place, I could tell it was out of the colonies somewhere, but it wasn't one I'd ever encountered before. This guy said his name was Elon Musk, and he, had three things he wanted to do with his life. One was to make humanity a multiplanetary species. The other was to break humanity's addiction to fossil fuels. And the third was to prevent tyrants from controlling free speech. He tells me all this in about 20 seconds. He also mentions that he needs a Russian rocket for a Mars mission he wants to do. And I was the guy he was told to call. So I was a bit bewildered by all of this. So I told him, listen, I've got the top down. I can hardly hear you. I'll call you when I get back home in about 10 minutes. And he said, okay, fine, hung up. So I got home, said hi to the kids, went into my office, called back, and I got a fax machine and went back to what I was doing on a Friday afternoon. And he calls on my mobile phone again about 20 minutes later. He's very angry this time. And he accused me of, ignoring him and not calling him back. So I said, listen, I did call and I got your fax machine. And so the one and only time he's ever apologized to me, he said, oh, I'm sorry. That was my fax machine. And I do that so people don't have a number to bother me with. And he says, my mobile. And he says, it's very important we talk right away. Can you help me find Russian rockets? I said, yes, I can do that. And he says, great. I'm going to fly in private tomorrow and come to your house. And so all the alarm bells went off in my head. And I didn't know who this guy was. I didn't know who Elon Musk was. So I said, I'm busy tomorrow. And I tell you what, I can meet you in Salt Lake City behind security if you fly in commercial. My thinking was this guy couldn't pack a gun, because he went through security. Number two, there were police nearby, and there's lots of witnesses. So from my time in Russia, this is how I learned how to do business with people I didn't know. So he did. He showed up. By that time, I had actually done some research, and I discovered this thing called PayPal, which I had no idea what it was. Signed up for it, got my free $10, found out about Elon, and found out his name wasn't Ian. So I could tell this was actually legitimate. It was a very interesting first meeting. Bob Zubrin from the Mars Society was there, and he's the one that I knew that had given Elon, my contact information. So we went ahead and put together a plan to look at this mission. And it was originally going to be sending mice to Mars and bringing them back and showing that they could survive the trip. And his whole idea was to inspire humanity to want to go to Mars. And what he didn't realize at the time was most people are sold on the idea of going to Mars. It's just an economic problem. And so that was what we stumbled into later in his sort of intellectual awakening on the topic. We put together a team to study this Mars mission. We ended up going away from the mice to Mars, and we're going to grow a plant on the surface of Mars using Martian carbon dioxide, which on Mars is not considered a pollutant. It's called the atmosphere. But it also is something that plants absorb and create oxygen. So we thought this was a great thing to do. Elon liked it too. So we designed the mission and then decided which Russian rockets would fit it. And so we made several trips to Russia. So on the final trip, Mike Griffin came along with us, and Mike later became the NASA administrator under Bush, and then was Undersecretary of Defense under Trump. And Mike at the time was consulting for us. And so the three of us went over to make a deal on rockets. First one we went to was a group called Machinist-Stroya, and they built what is termed the Strela launcher, which was a converted ICBM. And we went into this, really, it's a facility that resembled an insane asylum, to be honest. It was cold, the heat was off, it was November, and there were padded doors along the main hallway. And we got into the main conference room, and there was a long, table of finger food to eat. And so in the traditional Russian way, we toasted vodka at about 11 in the morning. And then at the end, we had a discussion with the chief designer, who in the old Soviet system is the closest thing to a startup CEO that you'll find. We went ahead, and I could tell as Elon was describing his life goals and why we wanted to go to Mars and all these sort of things, this guy was getting agitated. They didn't know I spoke Russian. And so I listened as he told the translator, tell this young boy that, we're not going to sell this serious machine to serious people. This is a machine of war. He's not a serious person, so he can take his bullshit internet money and go home. And then he proceeded to spit on our shoes. And it was funny, two things happened. Elon turned to me and said, I think he spit on our shoes. And I said, yes, I think it's a sign of disrespect, sort of tongue-in-cheek, if you will. Elon looked at me with this strange look, and then the translator said, well, the chief designer thanks you very much for your time, and he'll consider it, instead of translating it like it was. So Mike Griffin, of course, wants the hell out of there. We both had clearances at the time, and neither one of us were pleased to be in a place like this, because you never know what's going on. And so we left. The next place we went to the next day was Cosmotros, and they sold what's termed the Nepper launch vehicle, and it was a converted SS-18. Used to carry multiple megaton warheads, and now carried satellites. These folks were a little more businesslike, a little more westernized. The meeting was in a converted house in Moscow. They had about 3 people there, and the youngest one, oddly, was the one in charge, but he was a Air Force colonel. The other 2 were civilians. And again, they didn't know I spoke Russian. As Elon spoke, they were talking amongst themselves and calling him a little boy, very disrespectful. He didn't get respect. He was a late 20s guy. He was bald at the time, and he didn't dress well. And the Russians read that as disrespectful as well as amateurish. So, we tried to make a deal with them, and they wanted more money than we knew what they were selling it for by a factor of 4. And Elon knew this. And so we bid them farewell and got on the plane to head home. And it was a Delta Flight 31, as I remember, to New York. And as we took off, Mike and I ordered whiskey because it was a time to celebrate. We were back on sovereign American territory. We were clinking the glasses behind Elon. We were flying coach. And the plane was fairly empty. Elon was up in front of us, clacking on his computer. Even then, he just worked nonstop. And Mike elbows me, and he says to me, Mike was raised by an army colonel, so he speaks like this, and he says, what the fuck do you think that idiot savant is up to? Loud enough for Elon to hear. And I said, Plan 9 to save humanity. And Elon turns around and he says, guys, I think we can make the rocket ourselves. And Mike looked at me, and he looked up at Elon and goes, Elon, there's a whole line of dead bodies you're going to have to crawl over to get there. Right? This is not an original idea. And he says, but I have a spreadsheet. So I turned to Mike and I said, well, Mike, nobody's ever done a spreadsheet of a rocket. Damn, maybe this will work. So Elon, he hands his computer back to us. And so we started looking at it. It was a pretty good design, right? On paper, at least. And I said, okay, Elon, you borrowed my college textbooks. How'd you come up with this? And he goes, well, you can actually build rockets. And I figure with, my kind of entrepreneurial spirit and my access to capital, we can do this. And so that's how SpaceX started.
That's amazing. No, thank you for sharing that story. Very entertaining. And it clearly also shows persistence. I think both sides are on Elon's side, persistence, and on your side, mentorship. I mean, you need people who are raging to go, but then you also need people who kind of give them signposts the journey a bit so that it makes their life a little easier and faster. So I think we need both of those thinkers for big innovation to happen.
Mentorship goes both ways, by the way. So we mentored him on how to build rocket ships, and he mentored us on how to raise capital and build an entrepreneurial business, which he's obviously very good at.
That's a very interesting insight as well. Mentorship goes both ways. You just said the quote. Brilliant. No, this is so super entertaining to listen, Jim. Thank you so much for sharing.